Have you ever thought about how much history can be packed into a single day? I mean, what if I told you that one date on the calendar could witness the birth of nations, the fall of entire empires, and the debut of world-changing art? Well, today we're putting one of those days under the microscope, November 1st.
It's a great question, right? We tend to think of history as this long, sprawling thing. But when you zoom way in on just one 24-hour period, you get this perfect snapshot of the human experience. You've got creation, destruction, triumph, and tragedy all happening at once. And November 1st, it's the perfect case study.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at these incredible moments of creation and new beginnings. Then, we'll flip the coin and look at the inevitable endings and moments of loss. After that, we'll see how both of those themes just crash into each other in the amazing story of the Hungarian uprising. And finally, we'll step back and think about what it all really means.
So let's think of November 1st not just as a date, but as this historical pivot point, a single day where huge events turned, launching brand new futures while slamming the door shut on the past.
Let's kick things off with the bright side of the story, beginnings. Because across centuries and all over the world, November 1st has been a day for new nations, new political unions, and yes, even the birth of timeless art.
I mean, just look at this massive moment of creation. On November 1st, 1956, the map of India was literally redrawn in a major way. In a single day, Delhi officially becomes a union territory, and the states of Madhya Pradesh, Kerala, and what we now know as Karnataka were all formed. It was this profound day of reorganization that helped shape the identities that define the nation today.
This date also shows us that new beginnings can look really different. So, on one hand, you have 1981, when Antigua and Barbuda gained full independence from the UK, the classic birth of a new sovereign nation. But then, on the very same day in 1993, the European Union is officially born, a new union between sovereign nations. It's such a fascinating contrast, right? One day, two completely different ideas of political creation.
And creation isn't just about politics, of course. It's cultural, too. And this is pretty wild. November 1st marks the world premieres of two of Shakespeare's most legendary plays. The gut-wrenching tragedy of Othello first hit the stage in 1604, and then the magical adventure of The Tempest followed in 1611. I mean, two absolute cornerstones of Western literature, both introduced to the world on the exact same calendar day, just 7 years apart.
But, for every birth, there's an ending. And November 1st is just as defined by these moments of finality, by sudden, shocking destruction, the slow collapse of empires, and the quiet conclusion of influential lives. Some endings are just brutal, swift, and totally unexpected. On November 1st, 1755, a monster earthquake struck Lisbon, Portugal. But it didn't stop there. It was followed by a tsunami and massive fires that basically wiped the city off the map. Over 50,000 people were killed. In just a matter of hours, one of Europe's great glittering capitals was reduced to rubble. A catastrophic end for tens of thousands of lives.
Okay, so before we get to our next big ending, a quick definition. A sultanate is simply a state or country ruled by a sultan. Now, this is super important for understanding the sheer scale of the political ending that happened on November 1st, 1922. Because on that day, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, led by the revolutionary leader Kemal Ataturk, voted to abolish the Ottoman Sultanate. Now, this wasn't just a change of the guard. This was the formal, final end of a 600-year-old institution. Just like that, one of the world's longest-lasting and most influential empires was officially gone.
And endings happen on a personal scale, too. On November 1st, the world lost the scientist Alfred Wegener, the guy who first came up with the theory of continental drift. It's also the day Dale Carnegie passed away. His book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, totally changed how we think about communication. And more recently, it's when the great novelist William Styron, who wrote Sophie's Choice, died. Each one a final chapter in a life story that changed the world.
Okay, now we get to a story that perfectly captures both of these themes at the exact same time. The Hungarian Uprising of 1956. This was a moment of incredible, hopeful beginnings that just collided head-on with the tragic, violent end.
So let's set the scene. It's the mid-1950s, and Hungary is basically suffocating under Soviet control. The economy is a disaster, people's lives are getting worse and worse, and on top of that, there was this forced Russification. The Russian language and communist ideology were mandatory in schools. People's national pride was being stamped out. The whole country was basically a powder keg, just waiting for a spark. And that spark, it came from the students.
In October, they defied the government and reformed a banned democratic union. Then, on October 23rd, their peaceful protest at the state radio building turned violent when the secret police fired into the crowd. That was it. That was the point of no return. Within a single day, Soviet tanks were rolling into Budapest. A protest had become a full-blown revolution.
So, where was the rest of the world? Well, the reaction was complicated. The timing couldn't have been worse for the Hungarians. The Suez Crisis was exploding at the exact same time, and it completely sucked up all the attention of Western powers. But the revolutionaries weren't totally alone. Poland sent millions in aid and tons of medical supplies, and the sheer brutality of the Soviet crackdown caused a moral crisis in the West, with thousands of members of the Communist Party of Great Britain resigning in disgust.
And this really speaks to the moral impact of their fight. Even though the revolution was brutally crushed, the courage of the people who fought in it captured the world's imagination. So much so that Time magazine named its Man of the Year not as a single person, but as an idea, the Hungarian freedom fighter. It was this global recognition of their heroic, even if it was doomed, struggle for freedom.
So, in the end, while the uprising itself ended in tragedy, that beginning it represented was never really put out. For decades, you couldn't even talk about it. But by the 1980s, the stories started being told again. And then, in this amazing moment of poetic justice, on October 23, 1989, the exact anniversary of the first shots, the Free Third Hungarian Republic was declared. The spark from 1956 had finally ignited a lasting flame.
So, we've looked at all these different events, the birth of nations, the fall of empires, art, disaster, revolution. What's the big takeaway here? What does a day like November 1st really teach us about how history works?
It teaches us that history is never just one thing at a time. It's messy. While an empire is being formally shut down in Turkey, new states are being drawn on a map in India. While a city is being utterly destroyed in Portugal, a literary masterpiece is debuting in London. It shows us that progress and loss aren't these separate stories on a nice, neat timeline. They are happening in the same breath, all the time, constantly shaping our world in this chaotic, complex, simultaneous dance.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thought. If someone 200 years from now were to look back at today, this very day, as a historical snapshot, what simultaneous beginnings and endings would they see? What kind of story would our time tell? Thanks for joining me.